Welcome to Checks and Balances. I'm Michael Vincent. This is James Blair. And this week we have an extra special guest, Ilse Wolfe, head of Opes Accelerate and cash flow queen herself, talking about her personal journey.
Ilse, great to have you here to share your story.
Thank you. I'm so excited. It's great to catch up with you.
Yeah.
And thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so we had quite a lot of, so there was this other bloke named Matthew Harris, somewhat of a divisive character. I get it when, people aren't a fan. But he shared his property story and we had lots of good feedback.
Yeah.
We've spoken before that there's two ways to educate yourself around money. There's about talking about concepts and there's learning from other people. So we're going to talk all about your journey today.
Oh, great. Thank you. I'm very excited to share.
So Mike, where should we kick it off?
Let's start. How long have you been investing in property? Take us right back to the start.
Oh, gosh. So I just realized with you sort of asking me a few of these questions, I've just ticked over 16 years.
Nice.
But it's weird because I'm only 20, so it's quite weird. So.
Yeah. And what was the first property? How did you? I'm investing since a very young age. What was the initial investment like? What was the first property? What were your circumstances when you bought it?
Yeah, sure. They were terrible. I had,
but I knew a great banker.
Yeah. In banking, very good at my job. Terrible at taking my own advice. No. So I started investing part-time property investor while I was full-time in banking. And it was through that role as a corporate analyst for one of the main banks that I was exposed to, many different industry successful business people. And I just saw this association between, hey, either successful people are leveraging their properties to start business or vice versa. Through the success of their business, they're able to buy. So my association just built with that. I was about 22. One of the clients saw my interest, took me aside, ran me through the P&L, and I went, wow, this is like literally going to change my life. Yeah. I'll stop buying all the ridiculous stuff I thought was important at 20 years old. So through a little bit of coaching from people in that environment, bought a home and income, so a main dwelling, I guess, in Hamilton that had a granny flat out back.
Yep.
And that was really the first project where I sort of thought, hey, look, there are two houses on here. At the time, they were one rental. And someone said to me, hey, why not split them into two? And that literally was sort of from that born the value add thinking that I became addicted to, basically.
Nice. I actually just want to stop really quickly there because Ilse and James have made really good points kind of without actually overtly stating it is the first thing Ilse just said was I learned off other people. And when we talked about bringing Matt on the podcast and people learning off him and now having Ilse on the podcast as well is it is so important to not just use the resources in the textbooks but actually what have successful people done and how can I mirror that? Because you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You know what I mean? You get an idea of what's happening and then you just go for it.
The other bit is, some people might say property is a little bit of an addiction. And what do we like doing? We like talking about our problems. So nobody likes talking don't ask me about my problems. Yeah. But successful people, they love sharing their story, don't they? And they go pretty much, they just blurt it out, I find. I mean, so Sean McGirvin, partner at Hague Lion, shared a very similar story about how he got into property where he found somebody who pretty much wouldn't shut up talking about everything he'd learned. Was that quite similar for you?
Yeah, it's so true. And I think basically it's getting exposure to people who take the time. And I think once you realize the benefits, and there are so many from property investment, it does become addictive. I like to think of myself as a property hoarder.
For a second, I didn't know where that was going to go.
I'm an indiscriminate collector of property.
Yeah. But and the thing is, now with the immense knowledge I have gained from so many people, I just think as many people as I can, preach to, it is life-changing. And I think, there is no age too young to start being exposed to that. So, kids get dragged into the renovations, that kind of thing. But anyone who shows interest, if they're 18, 20, I'm more than happy to try and, sow those seeds of interest for them because all it takes is to have someone to take the time to show you a better way than what you're doing. And it can be absolutely life-changing. Yeah.
The other thing I'm really keen to talk about is you said your financial, circumstances weren't perfect, but you worked out a way to get started.
Yes.
We talk about a financial plan plus action equals financial freedom over time, but there's always an excuse. Why not to start? And I'm sure you see it quite a bit as well. Yes. What made you I guess, pull the trigger to get going opposed to going, well, I'm going to wait until my income's
this could
up.
Be better,
or,
and I can produce some debt here. And
yeah, exactly. So I've got a pretty dogged determination. So once I learned about it, it just has to happen. So that's just in my nature. And I understand lots of people, there are many different personality types, and it's so easy. Even in my professional role as a property investment coach now, I hear excuses all day, every day, or, the market's not right. I'm not quite ready. I just need to talk to this person. But once it really comes down to action, you can have all the research and motivation in the world. If you do not take that first step, and it will never be perfect. You'll never have all the resource, all the information. And that's almost actually, ironically, the perfection about it, because you need that in order to learn along the way. You cannot start knowing it all. And so just taking that first action to find a way is more important than finding the perfect way. Yeah.
I've got a few favorite sayings at the moment. Mike knows I love the saying. If you found the perfect time to invest, you've left it far too late. The opportunity's gone.
Yeah.
Is one that I'm really liking at the moment. So let's talk about your biggest challenges when you started investing in property. Where did you, so you kind of got some knowledge. You were like, yep, I'm really keen to go down this road. Where were the challenges you ran into?
I had no money.
Is that a prerequisite, Mike?
Let me think about that. It is the most common problem. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. So creative finance is definitely, these are some of the best stories. If you talk to any investor how they started, it's often those nuggets in that first deal, how they got that over the line, that you can learn. So the first property that my boyfriend at the time and I went to purchase with my discount from the bank pricing was, we needed a 5% deposit. So in Hamilton, where I was based at the time, I needed around $18,000. So my boyfriend said, "Oh, that's easy. That's not much. I'll front up 13 and you just throw in the other 5." And I thought, cool.
Where am I going to get that?
Sure. So walked out of the bank I worked at, walked down a couple of blocks to another bank and said, "I'd like to buy a car on an unsecured loan." So really responsible. So had this unsecured loan for $6,000 and went back, transferred that. Bada bing, bada boom.
Done.
First property done.
It's quite funny, actually. I have a very similar story where James and I have a very good friend. I won't mention his name. Maybe I just did and we had to cut it.
We only have 3 good friends. So.
Who worked at a bank, may have been doing some lending, got the application together, didn't have any deposit, called the credit check. Well, he didn't, but he got the person to call the credit check so that, they couldn't see any other credit calls on his credit check. Went down the road, got a personal loan for 20 grand and used that as the deposit. He then worked 7 days a week, 12 hours a day to pay it all back because it was up to his gills in debt. But it's how he got it started.
And where there's a will, there's a way.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Sneaky mofos.
It is. We are not advising you to do that. And by the way, it is much like, I just don't think you could do that anymore.
Nah.
I think with the amount of sort of checks that you go through at the banks, they would see that credit decision on there and you'd be done.
However, Michael Vincent Shark loans at 20%, he will give you a deposit for your house.
Very flexible credit policy and no documents.
Yeah, just a wink is required. Okay, so anyway, you found a deposit one way or another and you've definitely incriminated yourself. So good luck with future lending.
Limitations is done. It's fine.
That's right. Yeah. So you got the property and then what happened?
Yeah. So purchased that one and then it was, when I think about it now, it was that classic, hey, buy in your own neighborhood. It's exactly what I did. So hand up, it was 1 block behind the home I lived in. Nice. I was renting at the time. And I guess the first project there was to split the main house and the granny flat into 2. So learning about that process and splitting the meter for the power, etc. And then seeing the beauty of, hey, there are these 2 incomes that if I lose one tenant for some reason, because I think that's one of the biggest fears. You think, what if I can't find tenants? That's one of those first concerns. If I lose one tenant, I have the other one, so I'm kind of good there, and saw how much cash flow that added. Then that really kind of got me hooked, and 8 months after that, right on, literally just on the cusp of the GFC, about 8 months later, ended up being able to buy the house that we lived in at the time, and we split that into 2 as well. Yep. So within 8 months, had 2 home and income properties effectively. Nice. And thank goodness we did that, because when the GFC, global financial crisis, hit, the interest rates were around 9% fixed. And even with the 2 incomes on each of those, we were still topping up a couple $100 a week.
Yeah.
So that kind of was a real, that was a massive learning point to go, hey, there's something in adding value.
Yeah. And I know we don't like to dwell on assets that we maybe don't have anymore, but what do you think those houses would be worth now each? Just a rough guesstimate.
Yeah, good point, because I do have one of the two. So the very first one I actually kept. So when we split up, we had negative equity. That was just after GFC.
So you get one, I get the other. Stuff.
Thanks for just digging it in there a little bit, Mike. But so when we broke up, we had no option. If we had sold both properties, we would still have owed the bank after repaying the loan. So we ended up just splitting the debt down the middle and taking one property each. Yep. So I've kept that one. But really important thing is that still suits the type of property I want now. But it's true, sometimes they no longer serve you that purpose. I think if it had been just a standalone house, it definitely wouldn't be good enough for what I'm focusing on right now. Yeah. But again, having the incomes, it was really good. It's so that was bought for 340 odd thousand, and it's worth about 1.1 right now in this sort of depressed
and
stage.
Listen to that. The next time that someone comes to me and says, we're at the peak of the market, I'd be an idiot to buy right now. You could argue that the GFC at that time was the peak of the market and it all fell off a cliff the next day. If you retain the assets for long enough, it doesn't matter. These are long-term assets. You're not thinking about these on what happens in 6 months or 12 months. You've just got to hold on to the asset.
Yeah. So if you did buy in 2021 and you're going, oh, why did I do this? I made such a big mistake. Time fixes most financial mistakes. Maybe not personal mistakes, but definitely financial mistakes. So
speaking of mistakes, what were some of the biggest mistakes you've made?
Please keep them financial. We want to keep this,
keep this going. Sure. We want to go live with this. So I think there were a couple of properties following those where I thought I'll dabble in a few different types of properties or different ideas and not adding value. So not renovating or not somehow improving the value of the property or the rent performance of that definitely started to hold me back, because the second mistake I made was thinking, hey, I'd heard some information that, hey, if you renovate and you can form a deposit, all you need to meet is the LVR requirements and you can just go and go and go. So I became super tunnel focused on that, and I became obsessed with, I just need equity, and because that equals wealth. I'm not worried about the rent. I want the wealth. But there's only so far that would get you. And the first time I heard that was, I think I was about 4 or 5 properties in, and my broker said, you can't go again. I said, hang on, no, I've created that 20% deposit at the time. He said, no, but your servicing is too low. And I thought, what the heck? And it was in that moment I realized I needed a balance of both. Yeah. And so in that moment started to become really obsessed with, okay, I need to have cash flow as well. What also happened, and this is my biggest mistake, was that through that obsession with raising equity through renovations, I bought 3 central Auckland properties in really quick succession. This was within about 6 months. And then the Auckland property market flattened out. I'd maximized that recycling. So, they were really highly leveraged properties, and but hadn't actually looked at what the rents would be after the renovation at all. Yeah. And within about 6 months, I had this revolving credit that seemed really big, but was completely gone in 6 months. And I thought, hang on, what's wrong here? Finally put an Excel spreadsheet together and thought, oh my gosh, these 3 properties alone are going backwards at 55 grand a year.
Oh,
yeah.
That hurts.
fairly big mistake. And that actually was the biggest life-changing moment for myself and for my family. I had just had my first child. She was about 5 months. So like the stress, could you imagine that compounded stress?
Just the baseline stress level there is through the roof.
So we actually had to make some huge changes. We ended up renting our house out for a while. My in-laws very fortunately were able to put us into a house, another property that they had, and we knuckled down. We were on one salary, my husband's salary. I was, at home with a 5-month-old, and I just said to myself, you will never repeat the scenario, and never will you put yourself in this kind of risk again. Yeah. I had this master Excel spreadsheet, and I said, once a day, I'm going to look at this sheet and make one change forward. And every time I look at this, I'll make a tweak, one shape or form, and move forward. And it took us 18 to 24 months to truly clear out of that negative gearing from 55,000 to a point where we could change our circumstances enough to keep moving forward. Yep. But that was probably the most terrifying moment.
The daily tweaks, small little tweaks you made in terms of the spreadsheet. Can you just
what those were?
Yeah, give us like some high level kind of what did they look like?
Yeah, well, I made sure the first thing was the obvious thing I would do, which was check with the property manager. So our portfolio by that point was about 8 properties, Auckland, Hamilton. Yeah, just Auckland and Hamilton at that point. And so with both of the property managers, I just checked, hey, are the annual rent reviews? No, sorry, at the time it was 6 monthly. So yeah, can you please check that we're completely on market? Can you let me know if there are any other opportunities?
Yep.
Is there anything I should improve or tweak that would get us a better rent? And then if a tenant gave notice, I was looking at ways to add value or spruce it up, even a lick of paint, could get an extra $20, $30 a week. And I would go and do that myself. So anything cost effectively, I'd do that travel, rather than $5,000 or $10,000 for a professional paint job. I'd quickly gone down there because I'd learned a lot of the skills in my first projects. And then other things like getting a consent to add a second toilet, started to really put into effect some of my now current principles, adding walls to add bedrooms and just nudge cash flow as well as bring expenses down as much as I could. Review the insurance, review and negotiate property management fees, that kind of thing.
Nice. You've got a line in here which I really like. Cash flow is king. You can't buy groceries with capital gains.
So true. So true. Yeah.
Yeah. I tried to pay wave with a house. Yeah. It just didn't work.
I just had a brick.
Real short-term view.
You bought that from Webb's, didn't you? I was like, okay, I'm an idiot.
Yeah. So I'm guessing that was a combination of one income, having to do the sacrifice you had a baby, and was kind of looking at the cash flows and going, what do I learn from this?
Totally. And the really emotional point of that, I was really disappointed in myself because the property was my baby. We were a couple of years into I was moving into full-time investing through renovations, and my husband was working in marketing for a corporate. $55,000 top up purely on an interest-only set of loans told me that he was going to work for about 4 or 5 months a year just so we could stand still. And that's time away from us. That's time away from our baby. And so that was actually the emotional driver for me to fix that. Yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of obviously cash flow is king, you kind of your personal strategy, I guess, was born out of that a little bit. What's some of your sort of key strategies that you use at the moment in your portfolio, or when you're sort of advising other people on their properties as well?
Yeah, so I have this process called cash flow hacking, which was really kind of the culmination of all the wins, the losses, blood, sweat, and tears along the way. So a couple of years ago, or several years ago, really started to think, how can I buy at discount, especially in a hot market, or how can I look at properties that others are not? And kind of where I got to was, if I can quickly and cost effectively up-spec a property, that's one way to hack or to buy a property at discount. So if the bulk of the market is looking at 3-bedroom, 1-bath houses to buy as either a first home buyer or a doer, which is where many investors play in that kind of price band, I was thinking, okay, well, if I could buy a 2-bedroom house, because there's less competition with that, but one that's big enough where I could maybe turn it into a 3-bedroom house. Or if I could look at the size of that land in that section and add value some other way, I'll be able to buy less than what I plan to spend and put a little top up into the renovation and actually distort the rent. And that way I can get a better gross yield or return from that rent that way. So I started to play with a few different things, talk with property managers, talk with valuers to see where I could win on both an equity grab as well as rent increase.
And if that sounds interesting, we have a completely separate episode coming on cash flow hacking. So make sure to subscribe and give us a review so you see that episode. Before we wrap it up, I'm very keen just around the advice you give someone who's thinking about getting started.
Yeah. Oh, hang on, what have I put there?
So I think the main thing was about not being perfect.
And seeking advice.
Yeah, exactly. So to hustle and find a way is the most important thing, because you'll never have all the tools, all the information, all the resource, but get creative and find out how other people got into property investing and just take that step. Commit to making progress, and you will learn along the way. Ironically, but true, is that things get easier once you start, and it does snowball. Even the deals, as they become more complex, they oddly become easier to leverage. It's sort of back to front in some ways, but the key point is to not just be motivated, but turn that into action. And then the other point is you can compound your time and progress in this industry by leaning on people who have more experience than you. I always think about it as, I was this fresh investor, had no experience, but someone who had 20 years of investing was coaching me through that.
Yeah.
I got to piggyback that 20 years as though I had 20 years. So compound your experience and your time by leaning on people who are ahead of you and have achieved what you want to achieve.
Yeah, it's amazing advice there, because you just, the people around you, like we talked about at the start of the episode, genuinely want to help. You know, like it's not like everyone's hoarding these secrets, you know, like you don't have to subscribe to a YouTube thing for $59.99 a month or anything like that. Like,
although click the bio below.
You know, if you just seek someone out who's experienced, usually they want to help.
Yeah.
You know, they're not
totally.
like I'm not hoarding all of this to myself. Have a crack.
And that's the thing. It's if you learn from those people, you can avoid the really costly or the time wasting mistakes, right? And there is so much more information out there compared to 2007 when I started. It was who can I answer these questions? I'll talk to somebody, but there is so much free information out there. There is no excuse.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so we've got a part 2 coming up. If all of this is of interest, Ilse from Opes Accelerate is the person to talk to, but we're going to go into a lot more detail in the next episode about all things cash flow hacking.
Great.
So thanks for joining us. Make sure to subscribe, give us a review, and we'll catch you next time.
Cheers.